This is a dribbling and passing activity that I really like to use with young players as we're starting to talk about finding openings to receive passes and openings to play balls through. And one of the reasons is it's passive pressure on the passers. So it's pressure that involves people being in the area but not directly trying to win the ball from them. And it keeps everybody active and moving. So what I'll do is I'll take my team and I'll divide them up into groups of 8 so that we have one group that only has one ball between them. So we've got a group of 4 here in black that are only have one ball between them. Then we have the group in yellow that have a ball each. The size of this area is going to depend on how well your players can kind of manage the activity. I would suggest starting with a fairly large area. Start with maybe a 20 by 20 area, or you can make it rectangular and make it 15 by 20, just depending on how you want to start. And then if you find that it's too difficult for your players, make the area bigger. If it's too easy for them and their play is too spread out, then you can always make it smaller to challenge them. As you break your team up into groups of 8, I also suggest that you put players of likability together as much as you can. So if you have these 8 players, or these 4 players really, you could just do it that way. These 4 players perhaps are among your stronger players that just kind of understand things already. They're just a little bit more advanced. Then they're going to be able to work well together. Maybe this is a weaker group of 4 players, but they still get the idea of what they're trying to do, but they kind of get it at a different level, as a different level of complexity. Maybe they're just, still learning the very basic part of passing and receiving. So if you divide them that way, then the groups will be more likely to be successful and less likely to be frustrated. If you put 2 of your better players with 2 of your weaker players, obviously that's going to create frustration for the stronger players, but also for the weaker players, because they're going to feel like they're letting the other players down because they're not doing the same things that those players are doing. So I think dividing your group is important. But now what we'll do is we'll have these 4 players pass the ball among them, and the players without the ball trying to find windows that they can receive the ball through, or some coaches will talk about passing lanes. I like windows. It's just a good descriptor that talks about finding the opening between 2 players. If you can find space down the line, perhaps then you could talk about an alleyway or something like that, just depending on the words that you've chosen to use with your players. But the idea being to find openings so that we can find passes from one teammate to the next around the area. As they get this, now obviously these players are dribbling, and they're just providing that passive pressure that I talked about. They're just dribbling anywhere in the area, kind of being in the way, forcing these players to move in order to get open. As you go along and the players start to get it, then you can also have them, after they pass, require them to move to a new space. So that will require another player to fill in the space that they left. We'll just move this out of the way. So the space is left there, so a player has to move into that space, and perhaps they can receive a pass, or the ball's played out this way. Maybe this player's got to move up into this space, and we'll flip them around. And that way they're forced to move and find new spaces, so they're constantly adjusting. What you don't want is everybody to just be statically standing around the outside of the area and not really moving. They're not going to get as much out of that. They're not going to get as much understanding of just by just staying on the outside. So encourage them as they get the basics. You can always start with letting them be static, but then encourage them to move more and find those windows, find those alleyways, find the passing paths, the open angles, however you want to describe it to your players in order to receive the ball. So this is a fun activity, keeps everybody moving. It's a great warm up. So give it a try with your team.